Go to the ant, you sluggard, consider her ways and be wise, which having no guide, overseer, or ruler, provides her meat in the summer and gathereth her food in the harvest. How long will you sleep, O sluggard? About an hour ago, I was trying to get out of bed. I really struggled, even though I knew that I wanted to make a video and that I had to go to work at a certain amount of time. I was being a sluggard, so I'm glad that I just stumbled upon that passage right there. That's what I really like about the Bible is you can almost flip anywhere and just find something to learn from. And I feel every piece, every sentence, every word is just a nugget of wisdom. And before I was reading that, I actually picked up this book called The Power of Myth. And don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to correlate the Bible with myth. This is more about the power of story and what it does to an individual, how stories change people for the better or for the worse. And we'll dive into that worst part a little bit later. But sort of what I believe, and after reading this book, it sort of helped me see that our lives are made up of stories. Our lives are made up of the mythos or the stories that we tell ourselves on a day-to-day basis. We look at where we were, where we are, and where we're going, and we sort of shape our life off of our current beliefs. And where am I going with this? Well, where am I going with this? Yeah, upon reading this book, this author goes through a bunch of different stories throughout time, throughout cultures, and he finds a similar sort of motif that leads to the good life, and that's one of courage, one of bravery, adventure, so on and so forth, the hero's myth, right? And I feel like the more we're able to adopt the hero's myth, the more we're able to integrate good stories into our lives, the better a life that we can live. And at least for me personally, I feel like the Bible has like everything that you could ever want to figure out is in here. It talks about betrayal, it talks about glory, it talks about losses, wins, everything in between. Everything in between. And having a good framework, a good story to base one's life off of is really important, is really good. And sort of where I'm tying about some stories are for the bad is call me a conspiracy theorist. And I know this video is going all over the place. Call me a little bit of a nut, but what would you do, or hypothetically speaking, if there was a group of people out there that wanted to make the world miserable, that wanted to make the world a chaotic, disorderly place, what would they do? Would they just tell you to do these bad things? Would they just tell you to be like this? No, probably not. What they would do is they would change the stories. They would change the collective myth of the culture to something that is completely reversed of a good life. They would take something good and flip it completely on its head. And you almost see that today in societies. You look at what is popular, you look at what is trumpeted as good, as righteous, is actually, for the most part, completely reversed of what is good, of what's in here. And, call me a conspiracy theorist, but as I said, if you wanted to make a society miserable, I feel like that'd be a pretty good way to do it. Just take its most precious thing and flip it on its head and say that's the good, and say that's the great thing. I mean, it's just ridiculous. It's just, but that's at least what I see. That's at least what I've personally noticed. But nonetheless, yeah, the power of myth, the power of story. It's really important. And another point, so I've filmed a few takes making this, but a point I made in a previous take is I was like, depressed people seemingly have a lack of story, or people that are lost or anxious or don't know where they're going. It's like they seemingly have a lack of story. They have a lack of guiding light, of illumination, if you will. And yeah, maybe that's possibly due to their own fault, or maybe that's due to being misled by the culture. Who really knows? But I feel like the antidote to a miserable existence, I feel like the antidote to complacency and just being lost is having a good framework, is having a good set of values and a good set of morals to guide oneself. Because then it doesn't really matter what situation you're in. You could be in the trenches, you could be in the pits for all you will, but as long as you have that faith, as long as you have hope, then it really just, it does not matter what position you find yourself in, because there's always that faith, there's always that hope, there's always that guiding belief behind every action that things are going to get better, and that God is there with you, and that this is just whatever hardship, whatever hard time it may be, it's just a test. It's just a test to your strength, a test to your faith. And that changes the game completely, as opposed to a completely lost, hopeless, nihilistic outview on life, with no redeeming quality. I mean, that just changes the game completely. But unfortunately, to loop it back, I feel like that's what's being parroted in society, is this nihilistic, gloomy, no hope, destined for destruction sort of mindset. And I mean, we're seeing the ramifications of that. We're seeing what happens when we have a huge collective of the populace that are just nihilists and don't have a strong guiding story to back them up. I mean, it leads to hedonism, it leads to short-term pleasure seeking, it leads to a whole variety of things, like surges and crimes and not good stuff. And that, to loop it all back, is the power of story, the power of myth. Is it changes societies, it changes individuals, it changes lives, it changes the way we look at the world. But yeah, just sort of loop it all back. I'm very glad this came into my life. And an interesting story about this is, I sort of began to believe in God around 18, 19. It just sort of somehow happened. I stumbled upon the story of God, and I'd attend anyways, that's all I got for today. I know this video was a little bit choppy, but I hope you found value. Do like, do subscribe, and until next time, peace.